enjoyment, and the quality of life. There are two main strategies we can adopt to improve the quality of life. The first is to try making external conditions match our goals. The second is to change how we experience external conditions to make them fit our goals better. For instance, feeling secure is an important component of happiness. The sense of security can be improved by buying a gun, installing strong locks on the front door, moving to a safer neighborhood, exerting political pressure on City Hall for more police protection, or helping the community to become more conscious of the importance of civil order. All these different responses are aimed at bringing conditions in the environment more in line with our goals. The other method by which we can feel more secure involves modifying what we mean by security. If one does not expect perfect safety, recognize that risks are inevitable, and succeeds in enjoying a less than ideally predictable world, the threat of insecurity will not have as great a chance of marring happiness. Neither of these strategies is effective when used alone. Changing external conditions might seem to work at first, but if a person is not in control of his consciousness, the old fears or desires will soon return, reviving previous anxieties. One cannot create a complete sense of inner security even by buying one's own Caribbean island and surrounding it with armed bodyguards and attack dogs. 44. If we do actually succeed in becoming richer or more powerful, we believe, at least for a time, that life as a whole has improved. But symbols can be deceptive. They have a tendency to distract from the reality they are supposed to represent. And the reality is that the quality of life does not depend directly on what others think of us or on what we own. The bottom line is rather how we feel about ourselves and about what happens to us. To improve life, one must improve the quality of experience. This is not to say that money, physical fitness, or fame are irrelevant to happiness. They can be genuine blessings, but only if they help to make us feel better. Otherwise, they are at best neutral, at worst obstacles to a rewarding life. Research on happiness and life satisfaction suggests that, in general, there is a mild correlation between wealth and well-being. People in economically more affluent countries, including the United States, tend to rate themselves as being on the whole more happy than people in less affluent countries. At dinner, a researcher from the University of Illinois found that very wealthy persons report being happy on the average 77% of the time, while persons on average wealth say they are happy only 62% of the time. This difference, while scientifically significant, is not very large, especially considering that the very wealthy group was selected from a list of the 400 richest Americans. It is also interesting to note that not one respondent in any study believed that money by itself guaranteed happiness. The majority agreed with the statement, money can increase or decrease happiness depending how it is used. In an earlier study, Norman Bradburn found that the highest income group reported being happy about 25% more than the lowest. Again, the difference was present, but it was not very large. In a comprehensive survey entitled The Quality of American Life, published a decade ago, the authors report that a person's financial situation is one of the least important factors affecting overall satisfaction with life. 45.13. Given those Given these observations, instead of worrying about how to make $1 million or how to win friends and influence people, it seems more beneficial to find out how everyday life can be made more harmonious and more satisfying. and thus achieved by a direct route what cannot be reached through the pursuit of symbolic goals. Pleasure and enjoyment. Pleasure is a feeling of contentment that one achieves whenever information in consciousness says that expectations by biological programs or by social conditioning have been met. The taste of food when we are hungry is pleasant because it reduces physiological imbalance. Resting in the evening while passively observing information from the media with alcohol or drugs to turn the mind over excited by the demands of work is pleasantly relaxing. Traveling to Acapulco is pleasant because the stimulating novelty restores our play jaded by the repetitive routines of everyday life, and because we know that this is how the beautiful people also spend their time. Pleasure is an important component of the quality of life, but by itself it does not bring happiness. Sleep, rest, food, and sex provide restorative homeostatic experiences that return consciousness to order after the needs of the body intrude and cause psychic entropy to occur. But they do not produce psychological growth. They do not add complexity to the self. Pleasure helps to maintain order, but by itself cannot create new order in consciousness. Enjoyment is characterized by this forward movement, by a sense of novelty, of accomplishment. Playing a close game of tennis that stretches one's ability is enjoyable, as is reading a book that reveals things in a new light, as is having a conversation that leads us to express ideas we didn't know we had. Closing a contested business deal or any piece of work well done is enjoyable. None of these experiences may be particularly pleasurable at the time they're taking place, but afterward, we think back on them and say, that really was fun and wish they would happen again. After an enjoyable event, we know that we have changed, that ourselves has grown. In some respect, we have become more complex as a result of it. Unfortunately, this natural connection between growth and enjoyment tends to disappear with time, perhaps because learning becomes an external imposition when schooling starts, the excitement of mastering new skills gradually wears out. It becomes all too easy to settle down within the narrow boundaries of the self developed in adolescence. But if one gets to be too complacent, feeling that psychic energy invested in new directions is wasted unless there is a good chance of reaping extreme rewards for it. One may end up no longer enjoying life, and pleasure becomes the only source of positive experience. Without enjoyment, life can be endured and it can even be pleasant. But it can be so only precariously, depending on luck and the cooperation of the external environment. To gain personal control over the quality of experience, however, one needs to learn how to build enjoyment into what happens day in, day out. But by far the overwhelming the elements of enjoyment, a challenging activity that requires skills. But by far the overwhelming proportion of optimal experiences are reported to occur within sequences of activities that are goal-directed and bounded by rules. Activities that require the investment of psychic energy and that could not be done without the appropriate skills. Why this should be so will become clear as we go along. At this point, it is sufficient to know that this seems to be universally the case. 53. One symbol to fight challenges is to enter a competitive situation. Hence, the great appeal of all games and sports that pit a person or team against another. In many ways, competition is a quick way of developing complexity. He who wrestles with us, wrote Edmund Burke, strengthens our nerves and sharpens our skills. Our antagonist is our helper. The challenges of competition can be stimulating and enjoyable, but when beating the opponent takes precedence in the mind, overperforming as well as possible, enjoyment tends to disappear. Competition is enjoyable only when it is a means to perfect one's skills. When it becomes an end in itself, it ceases to be fun. The next component is the merging of action and awareness. As a result, one of the most universal and distinctive features of optimal experience takes place. People become so involved in what they are doing that the activity becomes spontaneous, almost automatic. They stop being aware of themselves as separate from the actions they are performing. It is for this reason that we call it the optimal experience flow. The short and simple word describes well the sense of seemingly effortless movement. The following words from a poet and rock climber apply to all the thousands of interviews collected by us and by others over the years. The mystic of rock climbing is climbing. You get to the top of a rock glad it's over, but really wish it would go on forever. The justification of climbing is climbing. Like the justification of poetry is writing, you don't conquer anything except things in yourself. The act of writing justifies poetry. Climbing is the same, recognizing that you are a flow. The purpose of the flow is to keep on flowing, not looking for a peak or utopia, but staying in the flow. It is not a moving up, but a conscious, continuous flowing. You move up to keep the flow going. There is no possible reason for climbing except the climbing itself. It is self-communication. Although the flow experience appears to be effortless, it is far from being so. It often requires strenuous physical exertion or highly disciplined mental activity. It does not happen without the application of skilled performance. Any lapse in concentration will erase it. And yet, while its last consciousness was smoothly, action follows action seamlessly. In normal life, we keep interrupting what we do with doubts and questions. Why am I doing this? Should I perhaps be doing something else? Repeatedly, we question the necessity of our actions and evaluate critically the reason for carrying them out. But in flow, there is no need to reflect because the action carries us forward as if by magic.